Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Mae Popoff. I was born in the Blaine Lake District as Mae Chernoff. My grandparents came from Russia. They were like the Chernoffs were on the 1899 first boat to Canada. And my other grandparents came to Canada as well. We were in the Trinity District on the farm, and going to school and education was a big deal because our grandparents never had that option. My parents got to go to about grade 5 or 6, so there's positive support for us to go to school. And of course, eventually then my two brothers and I became teachers, and we went to the country school, and for high school, we went and stayed with Grandma and Grandpa Chernoff, my grandparents. And then when it was my turn, Grandma had passed away. So Grandpa, the one that came from Russia, and I stayed in Blaine Lake. And then, of course, the time had come when I went off to university and also became a teacher. And as a teacher, I had been in different districts, and sometimes there was not a prayer home at that district. Like in Blaine Lake, there was a prayer home. We went to prayer services. In Saskatoon, there was a prayer home. We went to prayer services there as well. And in 1964, I married John Popoff. And we lived in several different cities in Canada until we moved to Saskatoon. And just as a matter of interest, husband John's relatives, his mother was a relative of Matvei Lebedev, the first Doukhobor citizen to lay down his guns. That'll say Doukhobor's are not going to serve in the military. God is love. We love God. We love our neighbor. And we're going to continue to love and respect our neighbor. And so that was the philosophy of the Doukhobors. And we continued with that philosophy as much as we could in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. In Saskatoon, we have a prayer home. We have prayer services every week, every Sunday. And we take turns as elders to conduct the prayer services, where there's, of course, a message we have, and we have singing, and we gather as a community, because where there's God, there is love. Where there's love, there is God. And we're all family of God. So we had prayer services, and then, of course, with part of life, there are weddings. So the elders can conduct Doukhobor weddings, and as part of life, there are funerals where God takes us back to our eternal home. And as an elder, we did officiate at these prayer services, funerals, and weddings. In Saskatoon, we publish the Dove, and I also get the Iskra, and I try to write articles for the Dove. And here is an article that I wrote about Peter's Day, submitted by Mae Popoff. Here's another Doukhobor message, June 26th, submitted by Mae Popoff. Or here's a National Doukhobor Heritage Village Interconnections article. So we try to keep in contact with the Dove, and of course, like I said, I get the Iskra as well. Now, when the Canadian Doukhobor Society was intact, I also was the editor of the Sheaf, their newsletter, and it was an outreach to Doukhobors in Canada, because where there's love, there is God. And it was an outreach in North America. People in the United States got it, people across Canada got it. The Sheaf, it was for the Canadian Doukhobor Society. So I actually had been an editor, and I try to get involved in the community. with the Doukhobor ideology. I belong to the Saskatoon Peace Coalition and to the multi-faith organizations, where we invite each other and we gather together and we speak at each other's services, because we are brothers and sisters, and it's an acknowledgement of people as a humanity. So we are part of the human community, the congregations. When we came to Saskatoon, that was where we got a trade. There's a university, colleges, different training centers. When we came as youth, we joined that choir, that youth choir, and there was an active youth choir there. Now, at one point in time, I think it was our director, Mitch Ozerov, he recorded some of these discs. And here's one called Disc 1, Saskatoon Youth, 1962. And it's called Darahia Minuti. Of course, they started to do that later. And as a Doukhobor choir, we actually recorded a Doukhobor choir CD in 2002. And the singing was something that we enjoy doing, is that a cappella singing together, 5-part harmony. It is really unique, and it's such an outreach for us to be able to do that. And at one point in time, then we were involved in the communities as well. Like, I'm thinking that there used to be a folk fest once a year. Different cultures would present their culture. And here's a card I found, Doukhobor Borscht. We gave to people when they came to visit our center. We gave them things, just a connection with us. So we connected with Folk Fest. Currently, we have a booth at the exhibition, which is a week long, but we bake Doukhobor bread and sell it there. And my goodness, that has such a good sales pitch. We had a building there for many years, and now this year they actually built a new building. And it's really interesting. It's at the exhibition. It's a brand new building, and the exhibition board built it. So anyway, so we are trying to be part of the community, definitely part of the community. And we try to visit as many communities as we possibly can. We often go to Vernon, Saskatchewan, and perform there. We have been to British Columbia, to the youth festivals. We had been to Cristova. We had traveled across the country. And when it was Voices for Peacetime in 1995, to celebrate 100 years that the Doukhobors were in Canada, we actually traveled across Canada, and we did perform in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. We traveled across Canada, and we actually went to the United Nations in the United States. Now, that was just so touching to talk about peace and loving our brotherhood. And the choir went to Russia as well. So that was that Voices for Peace choir in 1995. So we had traveled as a choir, and we tried to do local places. And we have been to British Columbia. But maybe with this pandemic, maybe a lot of things had stopped because of the pandemic. And I think we need to revisit visiting again, because it was just so delightful to meet with our brothers and sisters wherever they came from across the country. So maybe we can start thinking about that again. I was talking about our ancestors, and like I said, my grandfather was conscripted in Russia. And now in their family, he was the only son. Now, whether his father thought that every son had to be conscripted, or because he was the youngest in the family. So George M. Chernoff was conscripted. He had to do the army routine when he was 18 years old. And the violence that he had to suffer, as well as other Doukhobors had to suffer when he lived to be 91 years old, and the scars on his back never did go away. I mean, he lived with them for always. I do have a picture of George M. Chernoff, and this is his wife, Dasha Chernoff, and they came to Canada on the first ship in 1899. And like this picture has my parents, my father and my mother along with that same picture. And there's another picture here of my grandparent Konkins. I think they came on the second ship. They were George and Pola Konkin. And there's a picture of my mother and her family there. But anyway, in this book called Historic Saga of the Carleton Region, 1797 to 1920, there's a picture of Hrisha M. Chernoff. This is the one who was in Russia. And then they created a monument. They sent him a monument, created a monument, and he's pictured in front of it. And it's on page 103. So there are pictures of them there, and the past that they had to, but he was always a Doukhobor. He suffered, but he always said prayers. He always felt peace is the way to go. Peace is absolutely the way to go. Now, currently, Kuzma Tarasov is sending out books that he had printed. It's called Spirit Wrestlers, Doukhobor Pioneers, Strategies for Living. And he encounters people, and he talks about people. He writes about people in the past who contributed to Doukhobor past and in their settlement in Canada as well. And there's actually, he does do a section on George M. Chernoff and my grandmother Dasha Chernoff. And he talks about our history and how it was like to be on the farm, to go to school, to go to town, and to continue your education. And he has a real good article on us. And of course, then when it was my turn to go to country school, and how you got there, either in a caboose or in a wagon or in a buggy, or it talks about the conditions of the time. In our case, like, we lived in 4 different cities across Canada. And then when we had our children in Saskatoon, of course, they got trades and they got jobs in other provinces. Our son is in Edmonton, our daughter is in North Carolina, but that seems to be, you get a trade, you get a job where the job is, and we should have an outreach of some kind, like getting together on Zoom is a good idea. And our son Jeff tries to visit our prayer home whenever he comes from Edmonton to Saskatoon. And this is a picture of his daughter, and so he does bring them as often as he can. We all live in different places. Our children not often live in the same city that we do, and our grandchildren are so far, like for me, they don't live in the same city either. So anyway, it's just, we need that outreach, whether it's a choir, whether it's a book, whether it's an activity center. We need an outreach to connect with our roots, our Doukhobor heritage, and encourage our children and grandchildren to participate in any way that they can. Thank you very much.